Have you ever felt deeply connected to someone who made you feel seen in ways you can't explain, only to leave you stuck in confusion, overthinking, and questioning your own worth when they pulled away without explanation? What if the real issue was never the connection itself, but the emotional pattern it created inside you, and the way your mind learned to hold on to inconsistency, hoping it would finally turn into something stable? Welcome to Ghosting Psychology, where we break down the hidden patterns behind emotional attachment, confusing connections, and the psychology of inconsistency in relationships, helping you understand why certain bonds feel so intense yet so unstable, and how they shape your thoughts, emotions, and self-worth. Have you ever been close to someone who made you feel deeply understood, yet somehow left you constantly second-guessing everything? Someone who looked at you like you mattered, but then seemed to vanish as if you didn't? Stay with this until the end, because once you understand what's really happening here, the way you interpret this kind of connection will never be the same again. You won't just feel clarity, you'll finally start recognizing what has been unfolding inside your mind and theirs all along. Because what you're experiencing isn't just emotional confusion, it runs deeper than that. It usually begins in a way that feels almost perfect. Nothing feels forced. There's an ease in the way you talk, a natural rhythm to the connection. Conversations flow without effort. Emotions rise quickly and intensely. You feel noticed in a way that feels unfamiliar, almost like being truly seen for the first time in a long while. In those early moments, it genuinely feels like something meaningful is forming. Then, almost imperceptibly, the shift begins. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't arrive with clear explanation. It's subtle enough that you question your own perception. Replies take longer. The tone feels slightly colder. Their presence becomes inconsistent. One moment they feel close, the next they feel distant. And suddenly you find yourself trying to figure out where things changed. You start replaying conversations in your head. You analyze your words, their reactions, your timing, their silence. You search for a mistake, something you might have done to cause this shift, but nothing concrete ever appears. There's no clear ending, no honest conversation, no closure, just distance that slowly replaces what used to feel warm. This is where the mind gets trapped, because when something ends clearly, the brain can process it, it can file it away as complete. But when there's no resolution, no defined ending, the experience stays mentally active. It keeps looping in the background, demanding answers that never arrive. And in that space, your thoughts begin turning inward. Did they ever care? Was any of it real? Why does it feel so strong if they seem unaffected? Without noticing it, your sense of worth starts syncing with their behavior. When they're close, you feel validated. When they pull away, you feel discarded. This emotional fluctuation isn't random. It follows a psychological pattern. Unpredictability creates attachment. When attention is given inconsistently, the brain doesn't settle. Instead, it starts chasing the next moment of reward, not necessarily the person themselves, but the feeling they create. Over time, the inconsistency becomes more powerful than consistency ever could be. And that's why letting go feels so difficult. Not because the connection is stable, but because it's unstable in a way that keeps your mind engaged. At the same time, the other side of this dynamic is often misunderstood. Some people experience closeness differently. For them, emotional intimacy can trigger discomfort rather than safety. Not because they feel nothing, but because the intensity of feeling becomes overwhelming. As the connection deepens, something inside them reacts with caution, fear of dependence, fear of losing control, fear of emotional exposure. So instead of moving closer, they create distance. From your perspective, connection means building toward each other. From theirs, connection can sometimes feel like something that requires stepping back to regain balance. And this mismatch creates a cycle where one person leans in while the other withdraws. The more you try to close the gap, the more they pull away. The more they pull away, the harder you try. Over time, this turns into a loop that drains your attention and slowly shifts your focus away from yourself and toward them. You begin waiting for responses, reading between lines, and holding on to small moments of warmth as if they define the entire relationship. And even when part of you recognizes the imbalance, another part still holds on because the early version of the connection felt undeniable. So your mind keeps returning to that version, hoping it will reappear if you just stay long enough. But not every strong emotional experience is meant to be steady or mutual in the way you expect. Some connections surface not to complete something, but to reveal something. They expose emotional patterns you may not have noticed before, how you respond to inconsistency, how much uncertainty you tolerate in the name of connection, and how quickly your emotional state can become tied to someone else's availability. That awareness can be uncomfortable, but it's also revealing. Because once you start seeing the pattern clearly, the dynamic begins to lose its grip. You stop automatically assuming responsibility for their distance. You stop chasing clarity from someone who isn't offering it. You stop shrinking yourself just to maintain access to their presence. Yet while you're still inside it, the experience often feels like repetition without explanation. You try to move on, redirect your attention, rebuild your focus, and for a while, it works. But then something small happens. A message, a reaction, a brief reappearance, and the entire emotional loop activates again. It feels like something invisible keeps pulling both sides back into the same orbit. What's actually happening is that your mind hasn't marked the experience as finished. Without closure, it stays open-ended, like a story that never reached its final page. The brain naturally resists unfinished narratives, so it keeps revisiting them in search of resolution. Now add inconsistency into that loop, warmth followed by distance, attention followed by silence, and the emotional system becomes even more reactive. The reward becomes unpredictable, and that unpredictability strengthens the mental bond. It creates anticipation, even in discomfort. You're not only remembering the person, you're anticipating the next moment of emotional return. And when you finally create space, something else often happens too. The other person may reappear, not always with clarity or intention, but with just enough presence to re-establish the connection. And in doing so, the cycle resets again. Hope returns. Interpretation shifts, the emotional thread reconnects, then distance follows once more, and you're left in the same place again, wondering how something that feels so intense can remain so unstable, caught between emotional pull and repeated uncertainty, trying to understand why the connection never fully becomes what it seemed capable of being at the start. This is the point where a lot of people start turning against themselves. They begin to wonder if they're too emotional, if they expect too much, or if they're the reason things keep falling apart. But that framing misses what's actually going on. This isn't about being too much. It's about becoming deeply invested in something that doesn't offer consistency. And without consistency, there is no emotional safety. Safety is what allows the mind to relax. Without it, the nervous system stays alert. It keeps scanning, interpreting, waiting for signals that things are okay again. Even when nothing is actively happening, your mind doesn't switch off. It stays engaged in the background, thinking, analyzing, anticipating, waiting. Over time, that constant internal activity starts to wear you down, not because something dramatic is happening, but because your system never gets to settle. And in that state, uncertainty slowly becomes normal. You adjust to it without realizing. You begin tolerating less clarity than you actually need, and eventually, intensity starts to feel like meaning. But intensity and health are not the same thing. Sometimes intensity is just imbalance wearing emotional clothes. Still, even with all this awareness, the connection doesn't just disappear. It lingers in subtle ways, in random thoughts, in resurfacing memories, in emotions that come back without warning. And that's what makes it so confusing, because logically, you may already see the pattern, but emotionally, there's still something unresolved, something unfinished, something that feels like it could still turn into more. That feeling creates hope. Quiet, persistent hope that maybe timing will change, maybe understanding will come, maybe things will finally align. And while that hope is still alive, something else is happening underneath it. Awareness is starting to form. You begin to notice the pattern instead of just living inside it. You start questioning what you're actually receiving, not just what you're feeling. And that shift matters because awareness is the first point where repetition starts to weaken its hold. At that stage, the connection is no longer just emotional, it becomes behavioral. It influences how you act, how you respond, how you see yourself. And once you can see that clearly, you reach a turning point. The focus starts moving inward. Instead of trying to decode the other person, you begin observing yourself. And at first, that's uncomfortable because you start seeing things you previously ignored. How much effort you were giving, how often you adjusted your own emotions, how many times you stayed quiet just to keep the connection intact. And a difficult realization begins to surface. You weren't just part of the connection, you were carrying it. That realization doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels heavy because it removes the illusion that things were balanced or that effort alone could eventually fix the mismatch. Clarity often arrives like that. It doesn't comfort you immediately, it exposes you first. This is usually where emotional exhaustion peaks, not from love itself, but from overextending, from being the one who consistently adapts, explains, waits, and fills in the gaps. And then something subtle starts to change. You don't react as quickly. You don't explain as much. You stop chasing reassurance in the same way, not out of anger, but out of recognition. You begin to see that more effort never actually created stability. It only deepened imbalance. So your energy starts pulling back naturally, not as a strategy, but as a consequence of understanding. Part of you still hopes things might shift, but another part, quieter, steadier, starts choosing differently: peace over intensity, clarity over confusion, self-respect over access. And that shift changes how everything feels, because now you're no longer operating from habit, you're operating from awareness. That creates distance, but not forced distance, internal realignment. And when that happens, the dynamic naturally begins to change. The availability you once offered freely is no longer automatic. The emotional access isn't as open as before. And that's when the other side often reacts. Not always directly, not always clearly, but something shifts when they sense that your energy isn't the same. When you're no longer constantly available, no longer reacting in familiar ways, no longer filling the same role, the dynamic loses its predictability. And unpredictability changes behavior on both sides. This is also where many people lose their progress, because the moment they feel that pull again, a message, a reaction, a return, they slip back into the old pattern. The cycle restarts before anything has truly changed. But if awareness holds, something deeper develops instead: stability within yourself. You stop measuring your emotional state based on their behavior. You stop treating inconsistency as something to decode. You stop attaching meaning to every shift in attention. And slowly, your sense of self stops revolving around the connection. That's real growth, not dramatic, not loud, but structural. It changes how you respond at the root level. At that point, even if the person returns, even if they show interest again, even if they re-enter your space, you're no longer operating from the same emotional position. There's no urgency, no collapse into old patterns, no blind acceptance of partial effort. There's clarity, and clarity changes everything. Because now you're not trying to secure the connection, you're evaluating it. From here, two outcomes naturally emerge. Either the other person adjusts to meet this new level of presence with consistency and accountability, or they don't. And if they don't, the attachment begins to dissolve, not from emotional breakdown, but from understanding. You stop investing in potential and start responding to reality. And in both cases, something important becomes clear. The real shift was never about controlling the outcome. It was about returning to yourself. Because what once felt like confusion was actually a process revealing where your boundaries were, where your patterns were, and where your self-worth had been placed. And once you see that clearly, you don't go back to interpreting intensity as meaning. You start valuing alignment instead. You stop chasing emotional highs and start recognizing emotional stability. And you stop trying to hold on to anything that requires you to lose yourself in order to keep it. That's the real transformation. Not that someone stays or leaves, but that you no longer abandon yourself in the process. And from that place, every connection that follows is seen differently. Not through urgency, not through hope alone, but through clarity about whether it adds stability or takes it away. If something is truly aligned with you, it won't require you to become unrecognizable to keep it. It will meet you in your growth, not your confusion. What you're really looking at here is a repeated emotional loop between attachment, uncertainty, and self-perception, and it tends to form in situations where connection is real enough to matter, but inconsistent enough to stay unresolved. When someone gives you attention in unpredictable patterns, your brain doesn't interpret it as less important. It interprets it as not predictable yet, and predictability is what creates emotional safety. So instead of fading out, the bond often strengthens in a strange way. The mind starts tracking it. Small signals become meaningful, silence becomes meaningful, timing becomes meaningful. You're no longer just interacting with a person, you're monitoring a pattern. That monitoring state is important. It keeps your attention engaged even when the relationship itself is unstable. And over time, that engagement can start to feel like attachment, even when the actual emotional reciprocity is low. This is why people often describe it as, "I can't stop thinking about them," even when the connection is not consistently good for them. At the same time, your emotional system starts building expectations based on early moments. The beginning phase of many connections like this often feels intense, open, and emotionally rewarding. That early version becomes a reference point. So later inconsistency doesn't feel like a neutral change. It feels like something is being taken away. And the mind naturally tries to get back to that earlier version rather than accept the present one. This is where internal conflict starts forming. One part of you responds to reality as it is now, inconsistent, unclear, unstable. Another part responds to memory and potential, what it felt like, what it could still become. That gap creates tension, and tension keeps you mentally invested. Meanwhile, self-perception starts getting shaped quietly in the background. When someone is inconsistent, the mind often tries to explain it in a way that preserves connection. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I need to be better. Maybe I need to be more understanding, more patient, more available. This isn't a conscious decision. It's a natural attempt to restore stability by adjusting yourself instead of losing the connection. But that adjustment has a cost. The more you adapt to unpredictability, the more your emotional baseline shifts away from your own needs. You start tolerating ambiguity longer. You start ignoring discomfort sooner. You start normalizing effort that isn't matched. And because the connection still has emotional highs, it doesn't register as bad. It registers as complicated but meaningful. That's one of the most important distortions in this pattern. Intensity gets mistaken for depth. But intensity is often just emotional volatility. Depth, in a healthy sense, feels more steady, even when it's emotionally strong. On the other side, people who are inconsistent or avoidant in closeness often aren't absent of feeling. The issue is regulation. Closeness can trigger internal pressure, too much emotional exposure, too much responsibility, too much loss of control, so they create distance to regulate that discomfort. The push-pull dynamic forms when one person seeks stability through closeness, while the other seeks stability through distance. Neither side is necessarily acting with clear intention to harm, but the interaction creates a system that feeds itself. Your pursuit activates their withdrawal activates your pursuit, and the cycle becomes self-sustaining unless something changes in how you engage with it. What makes it especially sticky is the intermittent reinforcement pattern. When attention is inconsistent, each moment of connection becomes more emotionally charged. It's the same mechanism that makes unpredictable rewards harder to detach from than consistent ones. Your mind starts anticipating the next return of connection, even when most of the experience is absence or confusion. That anticipation is what keeps people stuck long after they logically understand the situation, because the attachment is no longer just about the person, it's about the emotional pattern your nervous system has adapted to. At some point, though, awareness starts to separate you from automatic reaction. You begin noticing not just how they behave, but how you respond. You see the delay between their actions and your emotional shifts. You start catching the urge to over-explain, to chase clarity, to re-establish connection quickly. And that observation creates space. That space is where change actually begins, not in cutting feelings off, but in interrupting automatic behavior. When you don't immediately respond the same way, when you don't chase the same reassurance, when you don't fill the silence with effort, the system stops running on autopilot. And that's where your perception starts shifting. The connection doesn't necessarily become less emotionally charged right away, but it becomes less controlling. You start seeing it as something you're in, not something that defines you. That distinction is important because it restores agency. From there, your choices begin to matter more than the dynamic itself. You start responding based on alignment instead of impulse. And alignment is a different filter entirely. It asks whether the connection is stable, reciprocal, and emotionally sustainable, not just whether it feels strong in moments. If someone is capable of meeting you in that space, the relationship naturally becomes more grounded because both people are no longer operating from anxiety or absence. But if they aren't, the mismatch becomes clearer without needing constant emotional turmoil to reveal it. And when that clarity fully settles, something subtle happens. The emotional urgency fades, not because the feelings were forced away, but because the system that was keeping them active no longer has reinforcement. The loop loses its fuel. What remains is perspective. And from that perspective, you don't just evaluate the other person differently, you also start relating to yourself differently. You become more aware of what creates stability for you and what pulls you into repetition. And that awareness tends to carry forward into future connections, quietly changing what you're willing to engage with and how you engage with it. At the core of everything being described, this is not really about one person or one specific connection. It's about how the mind reacts to inconsistency, emotional intensity, and lack of closure. When a connection is unstable but emotionally strong, it creates a loop that keeps your attention alive, even in confusion. The early emotional highs set a powerful reference point, and the later distance creates a constant pull toward what it used to be or what it could become. Because there is no clear ending, your mind keeps the story open, trying to resolve it through thinking, analyzing, and hoping. Over time, that uncertainty starts shaping your inner world. You begin to overinvest emotionally, overanalyze behavior, and slowly adjust yourself to maintain connection. This is where imbalance grows, not necessarily because of lack of care, but because the effort becomes one-sided in many cases. And when your emotional state starts depending on another person's unpredictability, attachment strengthens even more. But the most important shift in the entire process is awareness. The moment you stop focusing only on the other person and start noticing your own patterns, how you react, what you tolerate, what you chase, you begin to step out of automatic emotional responses. That is where the cycle starts weakening. From there, the direction of the relationship is no longer controlled by confusion or impulse, but by clarity. You begin to see whether the connection is actually stable and mutual, or whether it only survives through emotional highs and gaps, and that clarity naturally changes how you respond. In the end, the outcome is not defined by whether the other person stays or leaves. It is defined by whether you remain in a pattern that drains you, or you grow into a state where you no longer confuse intensity with security and attention with consistency. If the connection is genuinely healthy, it becomes calmer, clearer, and more balanced when both people are emotionally available. If it is not, your awareness eventually makes it unsustainable to stay in the same cycle. So the real conclusion is this. The lesson is not about holding on or letting go of a specific person. It is about learning to recognize emotional patterns, breaking the cycle of inconsistency, and returning to a place where your peace is not dependent on unpredictability, but on clarity, self-respect, and emotional stability. If this message helped you see things more clearly, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a video from Ghosting Psychology. And in the comments, drop the word clarity if this video resonated with you and you're choosing peace over confusion from today onward.